Welcome back to Under Oath, where sales takes a stand. If you are new here, every episode on Under Oath, we cross-examine sales winning strategies, battle-tested tactics, and the secrets to building an unstoppable sales team. So let's welcome back the defense. Zach Ramey, head of revenue at Rankings, who I just learned can juggle basketballs.
I can juggle a lot of things, but basketball is the prime thing to juggle.
I could juggle like a tangerine for a little bit, but like a basketball seems
Like a single tangerine?
like a small,
That was going to be my question. If I throw one thing up and down, does that count as juggling or no?
Yeah. Yes, it does. Introducing me, Scott Knudsen, Director of Revenue Operations at Rankings. My claim to fame is not juggling. It's really just that I fist bumped the Pope one time. That's my one leg to stand on. That makes me interesting. And then lastly, the ringer here, Cole Castleberry, the head of sales at Rankings, who we just discovered it's his birthday today. Happy birthday, Cole.
Happy birthday,
Thank you.
Cole.
19 years. Wow. You didn't look a day over 18. Gentlemen, are we ready to cross-examine the best sales ideas in business, challenge conventional wisdom, and uncover what truly drives success in sales?
Ready as we'll ever be.
Okay, court's now in session. Oh, look at this.
Uh-oh. I actually had somebody reach out after last week and wanted our address, said he would buy us a gavel for a congratulations on the first episode.
Better quality gavels as we go. We'll
That's
start
right.
with the plastic one that tinks.
Yeah.
We'll eventually
this
get
one-
a solid thud.
Yeah, this is a tinky. That's about as wood block. We need to get a real one.
Hopefully people are watching on video.
To start off the episode, we begin opening statements. This is where we take a topic. Today's topic is autonomy in sales. So we'll be talking a lot about that today. In our opening statements, we like to bring some learning or insights or some resources around that as it relates to our perspective roles. Later in this episode, we'll be talking deeper into the theme of the episode, autonomy in sales. We'll bring a hot take. But for now, autonomy in sales is the topic. Zach, what's something you've learned about autonomy in sales as it relates to your role as a higher executive or leader in a sales role?
Yeah, I think for me and what I've learned throughout my 10, 12 years in sales and working my way up to leadership is if the people around you, you don't give autonomy to, you're essentially doing their job at that point. If I'm doing your job, I really don't need you at the end of the day. I don't need to be doing people's jobs for them because the goal of having people around you and giving them that autonomy to lead sales, lead marketing, lead revenue operations is that affords me more time back to look into places that does need looked at to from a more granular level. Where do things need replaced? Where do we need to add budget? Like what is working, what isn't? And when you get that zoom out and you're not in it every single day, it makes decision making a lot easier. Whenever Cole or you, Scott, bring me something and you're looking at it all day long, it makes it easier for me to be like, maybe we should try this, because you get blinders on sometimes when you're in that department. And I just think that you should trust the people around you. I think I, as a leader, want to be, for lack of better words, the dumbest person at my table. I want to be getting taught by the people around me and let me make informed decisions. And if I truly believe if I didn't have that, we wouldn't go very far. If it was just up to me how far our team went, it wouldn't be that far. I'm proud to say that everybody that is surrounded with me at our table are experts at what they do. And I truly believe I give the autonomy to let them be that expert.
Well, we'll let you know how you really feel about that, Zach.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear y'all's rebuttals.
I think that's spot on. I think it's, there's a reason you don't have 5 centers in basketball, right? Everyone plays a role. It's important to let them run in those lanes. I love that.
Yeah,
Cole,
you
what about
added
you?
something there, Zach, that I think you say a lot, and you ended with it, but letting experts be experts. And I love that saying so much because it truly allows you to focus on your tasks at hand while trusting others to get their tasks done because you have an expert in that seat. So I think that's really impactful.
Yeah, I appreciate it. To expand on it just for a second, letting experts be experts. I think so many people are good at a multitude of things, but when you put somebody in a lane and they're super focused on how great they are at that lane, you then really, really find your success, especially from a team standpoint. And this is kudos to, our CEO, Chris, like allowing us to have the budgetary, money to be able to go and afford people that are experts in their lanes and have all those people running the race that we're running and they're good at it. I think has put us in a really good position to win and lead the way I like to lead. And so you can see the fruits of that.
Zach, you mentioned something kind of at the beginning where you said, I don't want to be doing your job for you. Do you think, what have you learned either in prior roles or in this role? Why does that happen? Why do leaders feel like I got to do it all? It's got to be my way. Like what do you think leads to that?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people, especially super successful people, feel like if their fingerprints aren't all over something, it's not going to live up to their standards. They feel the need to be the decision maker and have the opinion on every single thing. And I honestly feel that if that is happening, you've fallen short at leading your leaders by setting the standard that you expect from the people you're surrounded with. And that should be a joint effort. Cole, Scott, and I should be able to look at each other and say, this is the standard we all agree to. We're all going to hold each other to that standard. Our KPIs are around that. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This happens, or unfortunately, these are the repercussions of that. I think a lot of people struggle with that back end. They can't hold people accountable when it fails. That's an extremely hard thing to do because most of the time you have to set the stage with somebody who's typically a high performer that fails on that. And you have to hold them accountable. Normally, that's a good trickle down effect. If you're willing to hold your absolute best person to that standard month over month, year over year, other people see that and that just raises the middle up, right?
Yeah.
And it's just a hard thing to do because those are hard conversations. They're consistent conversations. And a lot of people shy away from it.
Yeah, I think we'll probably circle back to this, but what I'm hearing you say is people performing at a top level, usually in leadership, there is some amount of control they like to have. And to release that control is hard, but as long as you are able to maintain a standard, it's actually not as hard as you think, or you see better results, which I think that's great. Cole, I want to move over to you. You're leading a team, you're leading a sales team, you have BDRs and AEs reporting to you. What's something you've learned about autonomy, either in this role or in previous roles?
Yeah. What I've learned in my role managing directly is that the more I actually try to control my team or mold them into a version of myself, that's historically what I always thought is I need a bunch of me's. I was successful enough to get here. How do I make you do what I did? But the more I tried to mold everyone into me, control every single aspect, the results actually suffered. When I shifted my approach and focused instead on fostering a culture of trust, empowerment, and setting clear and realistic expectations, I saw performance actually soared. Giving people the autonomy to be great at their craft in their way allows them to be more successful in that role rather than trying to make everyone another Cole or another Zach or another Scott. We're all different in different ways. We just have to figure out the way to do that best.
Yeah. So you talk about, I don't want to make another Cole. I don't want to make another version of me. If you are successful, say you're a leader, you're like, I killed it. I did really well. I'm in this position because of my skill. Shouldn't I want to create more of me? Wouldn't that be a good thing? How do you get around that reasoning of like 10 of me would be better than none of me, right? Like how do you navigate that?
I think first it comes to understanding what made you successful, right? Down to the intangibles, the things that nobody else can replicate, but then also the things that you do that are replicable, are scalable, and then finding those pieces and molding people around that. You're not trying to create, I can never talk like Zach. He's from Eastern Kentucky. I'll never speak like you, Scott. You're from Utah. I can't be you, but what I can do is take the best things that you do and apply them to my side. One of Zach's traits is he responds immediately to everything and he is always on so he can be off when he needs to be. That is something that I grabbed onto when I first met Zach and learned that. That was not me before, but I made that. I didn't try to be Zach. I just took the best trait. So I think that's where you approach it is you don't try to mold them into you. You take what you know made you successful and employ those as options for them to follow.
I think a great thing Cole is alluding to, and Cole, you correct me if I'm wrong, but everybody can be great at the fundamentals. Some people may be able to replicate my accent, but not many. At the end of the day, you can replicate being on time, right? I call it selective professionalism. You can talk about showing up early to things. There is a foundation that you can set for people to mimic. Maybe it's not call lyrics. Maybe it's not how you coach or lead a team, right? But there are fundamental things that key word here is going to be consistency, wins more times over talent. If you can consistently do something, it typically beats talent. And for us, I think we found that when we teach the small fundamentals that we're good at, that we've learned about ourselves over time, if we can replicate those things in people and then let them have the autonomy to be their authentic self, that's where we've really struck gold. That's where I've seen Cole strike gold, because he is a phenomenal culture builder. Building a great culture lets people be themselves with a standard being set inside that. That is something Cole is phenomenal at, that I've learned about him over our 7 years together in business.
I think that's great. And I love this distinction. I'm not trying to replicate my talent, what I think might be the core of my success. There are these contributing factors, the ball handling skills, your endurance, your ability to adapt, or whatever it might be. I like that specific example you gave of like, I see the way that he's, responding. I like that. I like that. I see the success from that. I'm going to adopt that. And I think when you are a leader, to analyze, okay, it's not that I'm just a awesome closer and I'm going to teach people how to close like me. I'm going to teach people how to be consistent like me, like you said, Zach, or I'm going to teach people how to put in the work to understand my buyer like I did, to understand the systems that I use or the product that I use, right? Let me show you how I do that. And then as it manifests through your own set of skills, your own talents, that's really where, you're not making a clone of yourself. You're imparting on the best parts of yourself that can be imparted.
Absolutely. I definitely think you made a great statement there. It's not what you do and what you say. It's how you frame it, how you say it, how you collectively approach everything. Not the specific lyrics or anything along that. It's the entire process.
Yeah. My opening statement here is a little bit more about when autonomy, when is the right time to introduce that, right? I was in enablement for 5-6 years and onboarded a lot of reps. That's a question that a lot of people in that position and a lot of sales leaders who maybe don't have an enablement function and they're tasked with onboarding their reps have to figure out, at what point do I just say, hey, sink or swim, you'll figure it out. Throw them in the water, like they'll eventually get their legs, right? Mm-hmm. Where is that balance of autonomy where you say, hey, you know what? This person, they come from a good background of selling. They are familiar with our systems. I'm just going to let them run. Is that the right way to do it? At what point do you give them that freedom to have the autonomy? Something that I've learned is that there is a tendency to, when you have someone new coming in who by all accounts is proficient, knows the CRM, is familiar with the tactics you have, maybe has sold a similar type of service, to say, hey, you know what, just like go and sell tomorrow, skip the enablement process and jump right in. And what I found is that even those who are proficient need to be reintegrated properly before you kind of let them off the leash. And I think it's important for a couple reasons. One, we are sellers. Something I often say is that salesmen and saleswomen are blades that are constantly becoming blunt. We are sharp and fierce, but every time we sell, we get a little bit duller. We constantly have to recalibrate and sharpen that sword. This happens all the time. Reps get lazy, they get complacent. Anytime you switch jobs, you might know these systems, but you're coming from the laziest or the least structured part of your sales career, right? When you're coming into a new job, that's when you're the most structured, right? And that's usually because you've gone through something a little more tight and regimented. I think the mistake that some people make is they go through a tight and regimented system and then they jump over into a sales floor that is equally tight and regimented, where it says, use this script, follow these rules, demo this way. What's important is establishing expectations and how things are done and the right way to do things first within a more contained environment, and slowly easing off that brake and giving them that autonomy as they earn it and enter into the sales floor, right? So I think it's important to understand autonomy is really important, and it's a level of trust that you want to extend out to your reps. But there is a level of you need to earn it first and kind of graduate into it. Don't just jump straight out of the gate into autonomy. I found with reps that I've made that mistake with, they end up having to come back and relearn, and they made mistakes that they wouldn't have made otherwise had they just gone through the process of somebody who was newer into the position.
Scott, at the end of the day, even if you come in and say you have autonomy, have at it. It's now their standard, not yours, right?
Right.
So if you do not, I call it hand holding in the first, whether it's 30, 60, 90 days, just depending on how hard the process is to learn. But that time frame before you kind of let them loose in the wild, as you say, right? It is you setting that standard and then you getting the buy-in of that standard. Like we both agree that this is the standard and I can hold you to it and you can hold yourself to it. I think it's a great point for what you're saying. You always have to lead and show them. But I think it's also understanding who you are as a leader and how you want to run your department and how your company is going to run. Some people need micromanage and they want that, but you can't have both. You can't have people who need micromanage and have all this autonomy in your company as well. How are you going to run your department? You have to figure out how you're going to lead your department. Because if I let Cole have all the autonomy in the world and he tries to let his people have all the autonomy in the world, but he can't micromanage two of them, right? Because that's not the type of leaders we are. We've learned that about ourselves. So there's also a fit. There's millions of companies out there. You got to pick which one suits you as well as an employee.
You bring up an interesting point, this notion of micromanaging versus autonomy. And something that I think is at least worth considering is going back to what you talked about with relinquishing control. Micromanaging tends to be something that we rely on because we don't trust the people making the outputs, right? I think if you have a propensity to manage you should be looking in the mirror a little bit on why don't I trust them?
We're getting into hot takes. I'm ready.
We're in the hot take. Yeah. What standards have I set, right? And so I'll we won't delve too deep in it here, but I do think it's important to if you find that you are micromanaging, ask yourself why, and ask yourself, is that something that I'm just okay with? I want to have that, or is that a symptom of a larger problem that we need to talk through and address? Whether that's a standard isn't consistent, whether that's reflective of me not being able to relinquish control. Is it a talent problem? Am I bringing in people who just, they're never going to rise to occasion? Do I need to find higher caliber people and pay them more, whatever? This has been great. Great opening statements from us all. Now we're going to move into the cross-examination. Now, obviously, we've been kind of going in and out of this broader theme of autonomy here. Dialed in on a specific take that maybe we're going to defend, maybe push back on a little bit. We may agree with each other on some of these things, but we want to get a little more to the heart of some of these issues. So, Cole, I want to start with you. We've been talking about autonomy. You manage reps, you manage AEs, BDRs. You've been in those positions before. What's a hot take you found that you think is worth defending, or you think more leaders like yourself should adopt?
I think autonomy is a privilege, not an expectation. While everyone wants autonomy in their workplace, it's not something that's just warranted as a blanket. Hey, you get this because you're you or you're at a company. I think autonomy is something that's earned and something that needs to be kept, right? So I think there's this misconnection with, I'm good at a role, I should just have autonomy. That's not the reality. Autonomy is a privilege within the workplace.
Do you feel like that's something that you set the expectation early on? Do you feel like it's something you kind of dole out from rep to rep, or is it say, hey, everybody gets this if they meet a certain standard? What have you found to be the better ways to implement this privilege?
Yeah, we talked about culture a bit at the beginning, and I think that's just a part of the culture that I like to instill at rankings or wherever I'm at. Autonomy is something that you can earn. Scott, I think you articulated very well. It's not just something you get right out of the gate. You got to earn your stripes. You got to learn how we do things and what our expectations are. You have to understand what the standard is. But once you get there, I want you to be comfortable within your role. I want you to find what works for you. So it's an earned piece. But then at that same point, we have to keep it, right? If you're missing quota consistently, autonomy goes out the window. We got to get to the bare minimum expectations. That means we're going to do things in a more structured capacity to get there. So autonomy is an earned and continuously earned asset.
We talk about autonomy a lot of times. I think about it like a bowling lane. You can spin it, throw it straight, however you want to do it, but we're going to put the bumpers up on each side, and you can live inside that standard, right? In between those bumpers. But to Cole's point, the bumper, we can call it the KPIs. We can call it the delivering metric, whatever it may be. Sometimes you got to hit the bumper to get back down in, but we want to let you live in that lane at some point, or otherwise you're probably the wrong fit for us at the end of the day. But there's always going to be bumpers up because everybody needs to be reined back in at some times. And that's everybody across the board. If you get too much autonomy without being checked here and there, then you lose sight of what you're really fighting for.
I think that's an important thing to mention, Zach. Sometimes it can feel like as a seller, I'm the only one being held to this sort of KPI. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. Leadership, especially at that middle management, they're held to really strict, high pressure KPIs. They tend to be the ones getting the earful from the CEO, the executive, the board, whoever it might be. It can feel like you don't have to make these dials. You're not being held to the standard. It's like, no, my standard just looks a little bit differently, and my KPIs look a little bit differently. I think it's something that's really helpful, and some of my favorite managers have done this. They made that distinction really clear. Here's what I'm held accountable for. Here's when we miss, this is what it'll look like, and this is why. The clearer you can express that to a seller, then there's no surprise. What sellers hate, and I've been the recipient of this, on the receiving end, where it seems like, I don't know, we miss a month, and then the whole floor gets blindsided with this new structured system. We're logging all these different activities, and it's not clear. It doesn't feel like it connects to the right outputs. It's just it feels more like a vanity thing. There was poor communication from the leaders to the sellers. And I think sometimes that just happens. These departments drift away. You're in 10 meetings a day and you lose sight of that a little bit. Zach, I think you're really good at this. How do you stay grounded? And Cole, you can answer this. Well, how do you stay grounded to those frontline sellers who you will occasionally have to, bring back in with bumpers? Like, how do you make sure you don't lose sight of their situation and what they're going through?
I think for me personally, and again, everybody is going to have their opinions and how they lead and things like that. But for me, it's staying in contact daily with my leaders that I'm surrounded by, getting that information back, what's happening, what's the pulse on the team. And that's not just talking to the head of sales, that's talking to his managers, right? Or her managers. Going and actually listening to calls and watching recordings. That's how you stay on top of the game. Like luckily I'm not 20 years removed from being a frontline seller. Like I still remember that. When me and Cole came to rankings, we promised ourselves we would do things the way we wish we would have had them at past companies. I think we still hold on to that, and we're very close to that still. But I think that people who at our last company called it ivory tower leaders, right? If you never are willing to get into the trenches, you are going to lose that. You're not going to be able to speak to it. People aren't going to trust you anymore. I remember just like it was yesterday, people would come on our calls that hadn't sold in 30 years. They never listened to our calls. They've never been out with us, and they give us this feedback, and you're like, that's not even close to what it is nowadays. That's how you start losing that trust really quickly. You lose a lot of people at that point. For me, it's just getting your elbows dirty, right? As much as you can. Nobody should ever be an ivory tower leader, no matter how high you go. You should always be willing to get in the trenches and learn firsthand. There's never any bad ideas. It's just, is it a good idea for what we do today? You want to be able to invite that open door policy to your people. That way they feel they have the autonomy to speak up in what they see. Because I think the most important thing at our company is we're willing to listen to anybody. Our frontline people are the most important voices at our company because that's where it starts. If we can't get appointments in the door, we're screwed anyway. We want to be able to take that feedback and make them comfortable giving that feedback, whether we implement the idea or not.
Yeah, I really like this idea of the culture that you're setting needs to be such where trust is sent both ways. I'm giving trust to my reps, right, to go and do their jobs. Yeah, I set a high standard, but like I believe I've hired the right people to do it. With that trust, I'm listening to you, hearing the feedback that you're giving me. I'm listening to calls. I'm not becoming so far removed from this. I'm not just cracking the whip because the whip was cracked on me. I think that's really important to communicate for leaders down to reps. This is what I talked about. One thing I love that we do, Zach, is on our kind of sales all hands. You recap what you talked about in kind of leadership war room. Hey, here are all the things we talked about. Here's what Chris cares about. Here's what the other departments are talking about. Every week we get insights there. I think that's great. Sometimes I think those things get lost in the sauce a little bit. I can think of a lot of sales stand-ups that were just, hey, who did a good job last week? Great. What are we doing next week? Great. It's all just so zoomed in. But something that I love is, hey, so-and-so brought this up and made it all the way up the chain. That sends a signal back to the rep of like, hey, your voice still matters. This frontline feedback is just as valuable as my up on the wall looking down feedback as a leader tends to be, right? You need both, right?
Well, I think for our listeners, the reason why I recap everything weekly is because we move fast here. We make a lot of
Yeah.
changes. And typically when a lot of change happens and there's no reason behind it, you lose people, right? Oh my gosh, like another change. They're switching this again. They're switching this again. But we're moving fast. And I believe if you give that information as a trickle down effect, they may not agree with the change, but if they can understand at least why the change is being made, you can typically get the buy-in once they see the success or the pivot from it. I want to make decisions fast so I can either fail or succeed fast, but you need the
Yeah.
buy-in from the people that's implementing that, or it's never going to happen. So I think divulging 99.9% of information with the asterisk that this could change tomorrow, and our team knows that. But I'm always
Yeah.
going to be truthful with what's happening in this moment today, so you're prepared and you feel confident in your leadership.
Love that. Hey, Cole, I just want to loop back to you. You talk about autonomy is a privilege. It's not something that you're just guaranteed. What's something you've found? We've obviously had success. Your teams have had success. The members of the sales org all have a fair amount of autonomy. What's something you've found that has helped contribute to that culture where, yeah, trust is as a record highs, right? Autonomy all around, right? Like what's something that you could point to? Another leader who's like, I don't feel like I can trust anybody. I feel like we're really hit or miss. What's some advice or feedback or something you found that has helped you instill this culture of autonomy?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think 2 points that I made have actually been spoke on already. Scott, you made one, which is understanding both sides, right? Autonomy, how you get it and keep it from the good side. And then what happens when we need to adjust that to a more structured side of things? People shouldn't be blindsided by what's going to happen if they miss. You should know exactly what is going to happen if you miss your numbers and what's going to transpire. So I think understanding, and it's not like punishment. The solution isn't punishment. It's just readjusting, coming back to a framework and refocusing on things, understanding all components of autonomy. How do you get it and keep it? What happens if you miss? I think that's one piece. And I think the other piece was also spoken on. It's about understanding all players at hand. I like to consider myself a servant leader, which is I will do whatever it takes to win. That means picking up the phone to make dials. If we are 2 weeks out, we're not going to hit a number. I'm hitting 60, 70 dials a day myself to bring things to the table. And everyone around me knows that. And that's not bragging upon myself. That's just the culture I want to instill. I want our AEs to do that. I want our BDRs to step up and see where they can do more. I want all of our management and leaders to take that. We have a goal to hit as a collective. And while, yes, there's individual KPIs, we do this as a team. I think that environment is what allows people to stay in that autonomous route because they care about their other peer, the team as a whole, the company, and those numbers outside of just their self. So I think once you can foster that people care more about rankings or your company winning, you've done a good job.
Yeah, one thing I loved when I first joined, as our team started to scale and grow, these kind of new opportunities would present themselves. Hey, we have these new kinds of leads coming in, right? It would have been very easy to be like, hey, so-and-so, you're the most tenured. I want you to take all these. But instead, you took most of those, right? And you say, yeah, I'll do the first discovery on these because I want to make sure that I understand what's coming in before I hand it off to somebody who hasn't done this before. That speaks to your capacity to say, hey, like, this isn't below me, right? And also, I want to be dialed into what's coming in so that I can properly train and coach and up-level this team that this is a new thing. I want to be equally involved in the process that they're going through so that I can coach them effectively, right? Again, this disconnect can happen very easily. And Zach, you talked about this kind of this ivory tower management. I think even lower than that, it's so easy to lose sight of what your sellers are dealing with, the kinds of objections they have to overcome, the resources they have. That's something that I try and stay as attuned into as I can. It's something, coming from a seller's background, moving into enablement is really important to me. The seller's plight, oftentimes enablement in my role, at other companies, they don't come from a sales background. They come from a learning and development background or education background. That's great for teaching certain principles or product knowledge, but it doesn't speak to the hardness that sellers have to go through, right? And so it's always really important for me, especially as I'm evaluating tools, as I'm evaluating changes to make in our CRM or, updating processes. What does this mean for the seller? Is this more work for them? Are they going to hate this? Are they going to come to resent? Is this adding too much to their stack, right? I think staying connected allows you to maintain a higher expectation, and that higher expectation, as it's met, allows you to provide more autonomy, if I'm kind of hearing that. I'll touch on my hot take really quick because I think it's connected to what we've been talking about. Mine is that managing autonomy is just as important as offering it. So there's the autonomy that leaders give to reps, knowing as the person who has the discretionary power to give the autonomy, your capacity to manage that autonomy is in and of itself a skill. If you aren't doing it correctly, it can just as easily crumble. I think Zach does a really good job of this. Zach will say to me and Cole, you guys are my experts. I'm not doing your jobs. I don't want to do your jobs. I'm not skilled in your jobs. That's good and great. The piece of the puzzle that sometimes doesn't get put in is Zach now goes to Chris, his boss and the leader of our company. Zach needs to make sure that Chris, who may not understand what we do or why we do or how we do it, that gets relayed to Chris effectively, right? He might have a different perspective on things. There's this important communication channel that needs to happen, which is if I'm giving trust below me, I need to make sure that people connected to those people understand why and how I'm giving that trust and the consequences when that standard isn't met. You can keep it all in your head and be like, oh no, I've got it managed, but it can spiral really quickly. And I've seen it happen a dozen times where somebody not connected to the situation says, new rule, everybody does this now, right? Because they're the ones who hold the higher keys there, right? And this culture that maybe you established, again, can crumble really fastly because they didn't understand that dynamic. Zach, tell me a little bit about that. Is that something you think about, in your relationship to other department heads, especially to Chris or the owner of a company? How do you manage autonomy, as a separate, from giving it out?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, once you have an expert doing their job, right? Scott, I consider you an expert at your craft. Cole, consider you an expert at your craft. I do have to go back to Chris and explain why we are making certain decisions in my specific role. And if you all cannot teach me the reason why we're making said decisions, it's not a good enough decision for me yet, right? I have to be able to go back and you have to be able to explain it to me like a 5-year-old if it's a certain situation. And then I have to be able to explain that back to Chris so that he understands or give the correct insight of what he wants and how he wants his company led. So the autonomy here is I want you all to make the decisions that you think's best. But if you cannot explain it to me to understand, how you explain it to the people under you to implement it, right? So that's why I'm so keen on letting experts be experts, but it's letting an expert be an expert and be a teacher as well, right? And that's how those decisions get made and they get passed down properly and also passed up properly. And that's how that chain of communication, which will lead into my hot take, matters so much.
Yeah, we'll circle back. Both of you could field this question, but how do you draw that line of giving autonomy to someone who reports to you? And there are decisions that you want to make, and there are decisions that they need to make. How do you find that line of I'm going to trust the person that I've hired to do the job and not just impose my opinion and my will automatically? Because in my mind, I don't know, I read this, I think that I'm right. This is my read on it, and I have the ability to make this decision. How do you balance that of like, no, but I could be wrong? How do you find that line where you actually let them make the decisions that they need to make, that you don't just impose your will regardless?
Yeah, I think it's a tough one, especially in sales, right? Because at the end of the day, from a sales team, we have a result that needs to be hit. And I've learned historically, good decisions, bad decisions. I'm not 100% right ever, but sometimes you can see like, I need this decision made. There are times when you just say, this is the answer to give. But a lot of times you also want your people to grow, right? And sometimes that means stumbling or working through it. So that's where the coaching component comes in. It's allowing people to make those decisions and either fail forward, backwards, progress in a way. You might see that writing, but some people have to learn through those experiences. You can't carve a perfect world for everything. I would say It's a hard one to answer because there's nuances to each side. I would say I lean on trusting people to make the right decision more times than not, because they're going to learn the outcome one way or the other. And then we're going to have to create a solution that comes next.
Yeah. Something I love, Zach, that you've done, at least in my realm, is, you've said, hey, I want to give some feedback to one of your reports, right? Instead of saying, this sucks, fix it, you're on the line here. It's like, hey, here's some feedback. It's constructive. I know that you'll fix this. I'm not worried about it. Standard stays the same, but this is a learning opportunity, right? And that perspective of like, I'm viewing this as a learning opportunity. I'm not viewing this as a, hey, you can mess up as many times as you want, but you I feel a good job of saying you are allowed to make mistakes. If you had zero tolerance for any mistakes, there would be no growth. It's really important to find that level of what am I willing to tolerate. That will suck. I will, as a leader, like that rolls up to me, that rolls up to you. You have to speak to that, right? And I think you've mentioned that before. Like there is a certain amount of crow that I'll eat or have egg on my face. It's like, yeah, I have to own that. But as long as that gets trickled back down, like this is a learning opportunity. I know you can be better. Let's come up with a plan to get better. I've seen that. At least that's one of the things I love about our situation, is that I feel like you've done a really good job of making sure there's enough room for failure and growth without compromising expectation.
I appreciate that. I'll just go ahead and lead into my hot take.
Yeah,
My hot take is, if you are avoiding hard conversations, it will stop your growth or cost you your job. I feel extremely confident about that sentence in an autonomous role. And the reason why is, if you're not willing to have the tough conversations, when people have autonomy, they're going to keep doing what they're doing. Right.
Yep.
And then at the end of the day, I'm a leader who has extreme ownership. I think everything is my fault. Right. I own that, whether it's my fault or not. I am going to go fall on that sword. I am going to have egg on my face, to take your words, Scott, because as a good leader, every decision falls on your shoulders, whether you made it or not, because that's the team you put in place. You gave them the autonomy. And then that's when you go back and, like you said, give them the opportunity to fix it. Remember, set the standard. And it can only happen so many times. And you set that, right? Like, we can't have this conversation again, or we're going to have to do it my way. Right. And
Right.
I truly believe leaders and even frontline people who avoid tough conversations, that's whether it's up the chain or down the chain, it will either halt your growth or cost you your job, because they just have no choice but to happen. It also shows that you're willing to stand up for what you believe in. It shows that you're willing to try to show that there's a better way, because not everything we do here is the perfect way, right? That's why we want that feedback and encourage that feedback. But also take that extreme ownership role, right? If you felt a certain way and didn't have the, to bring it forward and say it, then that's on you at that point, right? I believe every single day that if I get fired tomorrow, I can look in the mirror and say it was my fault, right? I said what I needed to say to every single person, and I implemented the things that I thought would make us win. I never want to sit in a room and get fired and be like, but if they didn't. No, it's always on Zach. Always.
Yep. I love that. This notion of, it doesn't have to be a combative conversation. It doesn't have to be even a negative conversation. A hard conversation is a conversation that requires thought, and it requires nuance and patience, right? And again, I think there's a right way and a wrong way to have those conversations. I think sometimes some leaders can slip a little bit too far into the intense, fix it now, right? Leaning into the stick. It doesn't mean that you need to not have consequences or be blunt or frank. This is something I think you've done really well, Zach. It's okay to be like, look, we run fast here. We operate at a high level here. We're not interested in being mediocre. There are plenty of places that are interested in, or much more tolerant of, hey, just be a cog in the wheel of a bigger machine, and that's all we need from you. If that's what you're looking for, that's great. There are plenty of places and opportunities where you can find that. That isn't what we're looking for here. The culture of a company that's trying to be successful, trying to do something different, trying to excel and be great or make tons of money or whatever, that needs to be clearly articulated to everyone from top to bottom. just like in a sports team, if somebody's making mistakes, it's okay. It doesn't mean you're kicked off the team necessarily, but there needs to be that conversation of like, hey, this thing that happened is on you. And do you realize that? What changes have you made? I want to be able to know that in the future, as you will make another mistake of a different sort, you will have learned from this one so that you can address that and reduce the amount of mistakes that you make in the future.
I agree. And I think as a good leader, like at least for me and the way I look at things is I don't like the term leadership style because I don't coach or lead everybody the exact same way on my team. Right. I think that is an overused term that this is my style. I think that I'm a very blunt leader, but I also know how to frame it differently for people who don't handle bluntness as well. And I can still get the same point across. And that is learning the people that you are leading. I know how I can speak to Cole. I know how I can speak to Scott. I know how I can speak to each of my leaders and how they like to be spoken to. Do you want me to beat around the bush or not? Do you need me to let you have a, oh my gosh moment and you learn that yourself? Right? Like you as a leader have to be able to give that autonomy to your people to teach them the way they need to be taught, because not everybody learns the same or you can speak to the same. And I think that has been my biggest growth as a leader, that I don't manage everybody the same. I am able to come to them and let them, it could be the same learning for all 5 people that report to me, but I taught it 5 different ways. But it's making sure that they all understand the standard of that way that I taught, and we're all running towards the same goal and they agree upon it.
Yeah, I'm sure, Cole, you probably could echo the same thing, just managing reps on the front line, right? You can have theme or a particular, bits of a style, but at the end of the day, I'm sure that you probably coach each of your reps a little bit differently. The way in which you have those conversations probably changes. Is it any different from dealing with direct reports as opposed to frontline sellers, or is it about the same for you?
No, I think that's a perfect thought. If you're trying to blanket lead, you will not reach everyone at the same capacity. You have to understand who somebody is and where their strengths are and how they want to be coached, and employ your own ideals as well. It is different in every conversation you have. It's different in the way I communicate with Zach than I communicate with you. That's just the nature of humanity, right? We're not all similar. If I try to talk to everyone the exact same, we would never move anywhere. We would just be stuck in mud. And that's because people learn differently. People expect things differently. People have different motivations, right? Some might be money motivated. Some might be time motivated. Some might be growth motivated. And all of those are different conversations. So absolutely, it's completely different with every interaction I have.
And I think that point you just made, Cole, if you read between the lines here, what you're saying is a good leader does not settle with, this is my management style, get on or get off, right? A good leader, somebody who is mature in their leadership role, understands that this requires effort from me. I have to understand my reps. I have to learn how to coach them. I have to maintain a standard, right? That's more work for you as a leader. That's part of the game, right? Sometimes it can feel like a seller gets off the battlefield into a management position or into a leadership position, and they're like, fine, I can just tell people what to do, and I don't have to do any of the, quote unquote grunt work. And it's like, no, you're doing just as much work. It's just funneled in a different way. If it doesn't feel like work to you, if it feels like you're just herding cats, you have plateaued as a leader. You should be thinking, why aren't my team blowing it out of the water? What can I be doing to be a better leader for them? That should be constantly on your mind. That's something I think about a lot, and something I've had to learn over the last 6 months. Of these reports that I have, I could just be a soundboard to them, be like, hey, let me know if you need anything. But that's not good enough. I want them to be like, Scott was a good leader. He helped me achieve a higher plane. He helped me in my career, right? Those are my goals, right? And that means I need to understand them. I need to be involved in their day-to-day. I need to be on the front lines, as you talked about, Cole, listening to calls, being part of it, right? And not satisfied with just the status quo of this is just how it is. This is how I manage. Yep. Zach, you were going to say something.
One of my favorite quotes, if you have a cookie cutter approach, just go ahead and accept cookie cutter results. 100%. I mean, it's going to happen every time. Every interaction, every person should be custom. Custom approach, you get high-end results. A super high-end experience with custom. I truly believe that in my heart and soul. If you're going to show up to every day and treat everybody the exact same, teach them the exact same, coach them the exact same, just know you're going to get subpar results at the end of that.
That's a perfect, as we wrap up the episode here, closing argument, Zach. I'm going to attribute that one to you. Cookie cutter results. Yeah, you can expect
cookie cutter approach gets cookie cutter results.
That's nice and pithy. Right in a bumper sticker there. Cole, what's your, closing argument? What's one takeaway, if you can summarize a point you've made or something that you want to leave with our listeners? What's one thing you want to impart to them?
I think when it comes to autonomy, you have to have a clear system to inspect what you expect. Autonomy doesn't mean giving blind trust without guardrails. It means creating tailored expectations and delivering upon them so you can have that autonomy work environment.
Ooh, love it. My last bit of advice or wisdom: great leaders don't just give directions. They balance autonomy with accountability, and they are guiding without controlling. There's an important distinction there. Cole, Zach, it's been great. To our listeners, we appreciate you sticking with us. Hopefully this gives you a good insight of how a typical episode is going to go. Next week or the following, we'll bring on another guest to bring on their hot takes and cross-examine them. Give us a rating on Apple, on Spotify. Watch us on YouTube if you want to see our beautiful faces. We're on all these great platforms. That's going to wrap it up for Under Oath. I've got my gavel here. Court's adjourned?
Court's adjourned.
Court's adjourned.
But a sail built on trust, oh, that's the flair. Honesty sells, beware the snare. Under oath, you gotta keep it true. Win their hearts with what you do, not just the clothes